Hello, hello, hello. Jordan Chariton with Jordan Chariton. Live on the YouTube, live on the Periscope, live on the Twitch. Hope everyone's having a lovely day today. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter live stream, but I will be live, just so you know, I will be live tonight at 6 p.m. At 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Bernie Sanders is doing a special town hall on oligarchy. He will be doing that at 7 o'clock. I believe it's streaming on theguardian.com. Again, Bernie is doing a special town hall on the subject of oligarchy, so I will be live before his town hall right here, 6 o'clock Eastern on youtube.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. If you're not subscribed now, what the heck are you doing? That's youtube.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. I want to talk about the warmongering that is going on right now. I want to talk about the warmongering in the face of Russia in terms of what we just went through over the last decade and a half. If you don't know, tomorrow is the 15th anniversary of the Iraq War. That's the 15th anniversary of the Iraq War. Obviously, the Iraq War, nearly 4,000 American soldiers died. 100,000 Iraqis were killed and wounded. And it seems like we're having a gross selective amnesia about the fake intelligence and fraudulent intelligence and the warmongering that led us to Iraq, as well as the corporate media that aided those warmongers in bringing us into Iraq. And we seem to be experiencing the same exact thing now with Russia. Now, did Russian trolls, did Russian troll farms and what have you impact the election? Did they go out of their way from Russia to sow disinformation and propaganda and, fake Facebook pages and all the rest? Yes, they did. There's proof of that. How much it actually affected the election? There's no proof of that. Do we have evidence of some sinister plot where then candidate Trump and his campaign worked with the Russian government in order to hack Hillary Clinton's emails or the DNC's emails and pass it off to an outlet like WikiLeaks? There is no evidence of that, even though Rachel Maddow would like it to be so. There is no evidence of that at this point. But let me remind you, again, here was the headline. Here was the headline in the New York Times, March 20th, 2003. Bush orders start of war on Iraq. Missiles apparently miss Hussein. Just think about that for a second. We actually went to a war with a country that had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11, based on trumped-up intelligence. Literally, when they went to war, they were still looking for the weapons of mass destruction. And the same usual suspects that were pounding their chest on cable news and in the pages of the New York Times and all the rest are now going on MSNBC, now going on CNN, now going in the pages of the New York Times, pounding their chest for a new Cold War. A new Cold War. I heard John Heilman on Morning Joe this morning saying, this is Cold War 2.0. Well, for those of you that remember the Cold War, the country doubled the debt for that Cold War. Spent so much money on a Cold War with another country that it let our country go to hell in a handbasket as far as infrastructure, investment in schools, investment in healthcare, investment in jobs programs for people, investment in America went down the shitter so that we can build up the military-industrial complex, build up weapons, funnel money to defense contractors, and pound our chest against the communist threat. Well, I was born in the 80s, so I don't vigilantly remember that. But I'll tell you what I'm hearing on TV and what I'm reading in corporate media is having very, very deja vu sentiments to the Iraq War. Look at this clip from this morning on Morning Joe, which I watch so you don't have to. Here we go. Oh, never mind. Is it working? Share my screen. Stick with me for a second. Screen share. I guess that's not working. That's all right. Oh, hold on. There we go. Here we go.
And our elections.
Well, two things. I mean, I made the point because I want people to think about that word, right? The Soviet Union, they had elections too. I lived in the Soviet Union. I went to elections, but we never affirmed that kind of authority and legitimacy to Soviet leaders. Let's stop doing it with Vladimir Putin. By the way, their own people are saying the same thing. Margarita Simonyan, the head of RT, the Russia propaganda network, just called him a vozhd, a leader, instead of a president. So we should get our heads around that too. Secondly, I think we're also confused about the time we're in. We compare it to the Cold War, and then we all say, oh, it's really not the Cold War, so we can relax. And I think it's time to start thinking about maybe it's worse than the Cold War. During the Cold War, at least in the last decades, the Soviet Union was not annexing territory in Europe. They weren't meddling in our elections, and they sometimes did assassinations, but they didn't do it in this brazen way that Vladimir Putin is doing it. He's daring us to challenge him. And because we don't want to think in those terms, that we don't want to follow a policy of containment, we continue to kind of dodge that question. And I think after today, we should begin to think that we're in for a long, sustained confrontation with Russia, and we need a foreign policy strategy, a strategy of the West, just like the United States, to contain Putin's Russia.
Okay.
Whoa. Well, you heard it. We are in for a long, sustained confrontation with Russia. And this is now worse than the Cold War. What exactly is worse than the Cold War? The fact that there is now cyber warfare, the fact that Putin was reelected. Granted, it wasn't much of an election. There was mass ballot stuffing. His opponent wasn't even allowed really on the ballot. But you see this pounding of the chest, this talk for war, this talk for more aggression all over the corporate media. It's like these people were not paying attention the last 2 decades now. It's like they continually want more war. So, do I think we need to improve cybersecurity? Absolutely. Do I also know that we interfere with other countries' cyber infrastructure? Absolutely. America's interfering with other countries' cyber security as we speak. So, yes, we need to strengthen our cybersecurity, make sure Russia, Saudi Arabia, any country is not getting into our cyber infrastructure, possibly hacking electrical grids as they're now huffing about, even though I see no proof of that. But this talk of it's the new Cold War, this talk of it's worse than the Cold War. Well, all I got to say, remember this? Again, tomorrow, the 15-year anniversary of the Iraq War, folks. Launched on fraudulent and fake intelligence, but the consequences very real. So you have Michael McFaul on Morning Joe uttering this nonsense. And now, let me play another clip that I think shows the, I don't even know what you call it. It's just mass derangement and hysteria across cable news, CNN, MSNBC. It's obviously for ratings, but it's very dangerous. Here we go.
He's proving it every day. And David Ignatius, I would like to ask you, Russia attacked us. The commander-in-chief has done little about this, has said practically nothing about this. What's the impact of his inaction and his inability to deal with attacks on his country, our country? What's the impact of that on diplomats around the world and on the intelligence community here in this country?
Well, this is a period in which Russia appears resurgent, Mike. Vladimir Putin has just been wildly, clamorously reelected. He will be the leader of Russia until 2024. And we have other nations stepping forward to challenge Putin. I'm struck by the fact that Britain, a country that in many ways is on its back heel after Brexit, is leading a coalition that has France, Germany, and the kind of a somewhat reluctant additional participant is the United States under President Trump. I'm glad that the U.S. has joined in condemning Russian actions. Trump has been a little more forthcoming in his statements. But the points you make that he is preoccupied with these domestic issues is the right one. I have to say, Mike and everybody, a tonic for me watching this circus, as Mike says, it's exhausting. It drives you crazy. Was listening to Senator Jeff Flake.
I mean, where do you even begin? Where do you even begin? First of all, Russia attacked us. So you keep hearing this language of war and attack and challenge Russia. It's all a not so subtle way of saying we need to act. We need to launch some type of action against a nuclear armed power with an authoritarian leader who's crazy. Putin is crazy. And by the way, that gentleman talking right now, David Ignatius, let me read you a little bit about David Ignatius. This is from Counterpunch. Hold on one second. Over the past several decades, Ignatius has defended the CIA's political assassination program and argued that no investigation was necessary because, quote, nobody has been killed. He never condemned the CIA training of death squads in Central America, including Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador. He never deplored the CIA's Phoenix operation during the Vietnam War, when the agency ran a paramilitary campaign of interrogation, torture, and assassination that targeted many innocent civilians. And he never favored accountability for agency operatives who manned the secret prisons and conducted the programs of torture and abuse. Thus, it is no surprise, writing in the Washington Post on Monday, welcomed President Trump's ingratiating message after months of attacks on the agency. According to Ignatius, the CIA was tired of having a, quote, kick me sign on its backside and found it, quote, nice to be massaged. He made no attempts to assess the danger of trying to co-opt and politicize an intelligence agency that must remain apolitical in order to carry out its missions. And there was no attempt to judge the indignity of CIA officers responding enthusiastically to the president's harsh political statements, particularly his attacks on the press. Ignatius even endorsed the self-serving remarks of agency operatives and praised the appointments of CIA Director Mike Pompeo. Brennan has never been popular in the Directorate of Operations because he was an intelligence analyst who received an unusual appointment to be a CIA station chief in Saudi Arabia, and as director merged the intelligence analysts and clandestine operatives into one bureaucratic organization. I mean, I could go on about David Ignatius. He's been a CIA mouthpiece masquerading as a journalist for, I think, 30 years. I don't know where he was before the Washington Post. He's not a journalist. He literally has a speed dial Rolodex of CIA officials who feed him 9 out of 10 times propaganda and lies, and he then passes it off in the pages of the Washington Post. That's kind of what's passed as journalism now. That's kind of what is now journalism. The Washington Post, New York Times, and on Morning Joe. Because make no mistake about it, when journalists like David Ignatius get tips from his CIA buddies that he has drinks with, that he has meals with, that, you know, his sources, he's not actually critically looking into it. He just passes them off. Because Washington, D.C., the corporate media is an access game. It's not about actually making sure you have the truth. It's about trying to break news, even though it's not news, it's stenography. They're just passing off propaganda fed to them by intelligence agencies, which, by the way, intelligence agencies, if you look through American history, lie. They lie to the people. They have also lied to other countries in order to topple dictators. The CIA has ginned up protests in other countries to protest democratically elected leaders. It's happened in Iran, Venezuela, other countries, where the CIA will literally galvanize and organize protests to topple dictators. It's not organic protests. The CIA organizes it. The CIA has forged and photoshopped photos to fool leaders into taking action against leaders the CIA wants taken out. I'm not saying everybody in the CIA is terrible. I'm not saying everybody in the FBI is terrible. But this is the history of America, which Oliver Stone has wonderfully shown in The Untold History of the United States. I've been watching it on Netflix. It's incredible. I warn you, folks, as I have to head out to go to physical therapy. 15 years ago. This is what happened. Bush orders start of war on Iraq. Missiles apparently miss Hussein. The talk we're hearing on MSNBC, on CNN, that we're reading in the pages of the New York Times, as I've said from the beginning, I'm wonderfully happy that they're having an investigation into President Trump. I think there's more than likely evidence that he's done money laundering with Russian oligarchs, probably oligarchs from other countries too, and that he's done illegal things. And his organization, his real estate organization, has done illegal things. If they find evidence that the Trump campaign and Trump worked with a foreign government to do terrible things, he should be prosecuted. But that could be separate between this pounding our chest and the warmongering. We should not be talking like this in media. We should not be feeding the public talk about challenging Russia, talk about a new Cold War, talk about worse than the Cold War. And make no mistake, Putin, he's not a good guy. There's evidence that he has commissioned the killing of journalists. Putin's Russia is homophobic. They have beaten homosexuals in Russia. Corruption in Russia is rampant. But we cannot continue through our corporate media to pound our chest for more war. This has to end. Come back at 6 o'clock Eastern. I will be back live doing a special live stream right before Bernie goes live. Bernie will be live at 7 o'clock. He's doing a special town hall. He's talking to Elizabeth Warren. He's talking to Michael Moore. He's talking to others about this topic of oligarchy. I believe it's streaming on the Guardian's website, theguardian.com. I'll be live before. I'll be live after. And we'll take your stories of how this country's income inequality and the oligarchy is affecting you, the people. Thank you for watching.